So in this video we're going to be looking at the digestive system. So let's have a wee look at this diagram here. Now your digestive system runs from your mouth down to your anus. So this is the anus here. It's got various organs. Basically your digestive system consists of your esophagus, so we're going to have a look at each of these just in a moment, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, your rectum, and then your anus. And starting up at, well, that's a tongue there, up at your mouth. And this is a tongue here, that's what that's representing. There are organs that are associated with the digestive system, that's your liver, and we'll talk about that just in a wee moment. And there's also your gallbladder, and there's your pancreas. So they're associated organs. So I should really maybe just do those in a sort of different colour or something like that, but I'll do your other ones in red. So let's just have a look at the various parts of the digestive system first of all, and then we'll talk about things in a wee bit more detail. So first of all, when you swallow food, the food starts to move down your esophagus. Oh, I've got that too. I hope you can read my writing. So the esophagus is connecting your mouth to the stomach. Now digestion already starts up in your mouth. If you remember, you've got the enzyme amylase, and amylase is involved in the breakdown of starch to maltose. So already food is starting to be digested. When we talk about food being digested, we're talking about the food going from being large insoluble molecules to small soluble ones, because the whole idea is to get these molecules into the bloodstream where they can be used by the body. So food's going down the esophagus, and when it goes down the esophagus it gets to the stomach, and the stomach has enzymes in it that continue with the digestion, and in particular there's an enzyme called pepsin, and it's involved in the breakdown of proteins. It needs acid to work. It's got an optimum working pH is at around about 1 or 2, and so there is acid, there's hydrochloric acid in your stomach to aid the enzyme or to help the enzyme work to the best of its ability. Also as well, the stomach has got muscles in it that help to churn the food along with all these enzymes that are there. So it's not the acid that's breaking down the food, it's actually the enzymes or the pepsin that's helping to break down these molecules. From the stomach, food ends up in the small intestine, and the small intestine whoopsie-daisy, I'm spelling that wrong. The small intestine is involved in absorption of food, and that absorption is aided by finger-like projections, and we'll look at that in more detail, called villi in the small intestine. Then from the small intestine we go to the large intestine, and the large intestine is involved in absorption of water. So water is absorbed back into the bloodstream via that large intestine, and then waste ends up being passed to the rectum, and then from the rectum to the anus, and then from the anus out into the environment, hopefully down a toilet somewhere. Now, I talked a moment ago about associated organs. So you've got associated with the digestive system your liver, and liver produces bile, and that bile is passed to the gallbladder where it's stored. So bile storage here, and Liver, though, stores glycogen, if you remember your glucose balance. So glycogen's stored there. And then we've also got our gallbladder that's got the bile stored there. The bile gets poured into the small intestine, and it's involved in fat breakdown, but you don't actually need to know that part. And you've also got your pancreas, and if you remember back to your glucose balance, you remember that pancreas produces the hormones insulin and glucagon. And it's important to remember these bits of information about the associated organs. Now, in this slide here, we're going to have a wee talk about something called peristalsis. Now, whenever I talk about this, I think of, in terms of well, you maybe have never thought of this, but why is it that when you have eaten something and say you do a handstand or something, all the food doesn't fall out of the tube? Because effectively your esophagus and your stomach and so on, it's just all a tube that is there. And how does that food make its way down the esophagus to your stomach and then to the other parts of the tube, the small intestine, the large intestine and so on? Is it just gravity that's moving it through there? Well, it's not actually. There is a process which is called peristalsis that helps to move food down through the digestive system. And what that peristalsis is, if we have a wee look at the diagram that's over here, we've got here what is called a bolus of food. Now, what we mean by that is when you chew your food, you'll kind of be aware that, or maybe you have, or maybe you haven't thought about it, but when you chew it, your mouth starts to make it into a ball so you can swallow it, and so that it can start to fit down your esophagus. And as it goes down the esophagus, imagine this is the tube of your esophagus here, and the food is moving down it. What happens is that muscles will contract at this behind the piece of food that's there, and that helps to push the food, or the food bolus, down the esophagus if these muscles contract. But at the same time as well, the muscles that are at the front of the food here, and these bits here, these muscles start to relax. And because they relax, the food starts to move down the way. And then what will happen next is that in turn, that muscle that was relaxed will start to contract, and the muscle that's down here will start to relax. And so that contraction will push that piece of food down, further down the esophagus. Now, you'll be aware of this happening. Like, say you maybe have gobbled your food a bit, or you've swallowed a piece of food that's just a bit on the large side, you haven't maybe chewed it very well or something. And as it's going down, you can actually feel it making its way down your esophagus, and that's these muscles pushing that food down your esophagus. Now, this process, which is called peristalsis, it results in this kind of wave-like motion going down the whole of the digestive system, and this contraction, relaxation to push the food down. Now, this doesn't just occur in the esophagus, it actually occurs throughout the whole of your digestive system, from esophagus downwards. Now, let's have a look in a wee bit more detail at the small intestine. I said earlier that this is the area where the absorption of digested food takes place. The absorption of the food from inside the small intestine. So here we're talking about this area here, there's the inside. So there would be food molecules here, all inside here, maybe glucose molecules, amino acids and things. And here, we're looking down like a tube. So what we're looking at is, like, if we have a wee look at my pen here, if we turn it this way and we were looking at a cross section through it, so you're looking at the outside ring here of the outside of the small intestine. in this area here. That's the outside ring round about here of the small intestine, the wall of the small intestine. But you'll also notice that there are these sort of structures that are here. I don't know if you can see that very well with that pen. I'll try it in the blue. Yeah, you can see that a wee bit better. These finger-like structures. Now these are what are called the villi. That's the plural. Singular is villus, in case you see that word. But I'll just talk about villi. Now these villi that are here, these projections that are here, there's lots and lots of them. You can see all the way down, going all the way down the tube. They increase the surface area of the small intestine. So the small intestine is specially designed or adapted for the job that it's going to be doing, and it's made more efficient by the fact that the small intestine is very long, and also the surface area is increased with lots of these villi. So that increases the level of the amount of absorption that can take place. So let's have a look in more detail at these actual villi. So this diagram here is representing a villus, or I'll just call it a villi here in general, but this is one of them called a villus. And you'll notice that, again, I just talked a moment ago about the fact that the small intestine is very well adapted for what its job. Now, so are the villi. They've got a very, very thin wall, and you'll see here it says only about 1 cell thick. Now that means that if we've got glucose molecules out here in a high concentration, they're going to move or diffuse very, very easily into the villi or the villus. And from there they will move very easily into the bloodstream. And the same with, say, amino acids. We've eaten something, maybe a burger, say, so we've got glucose that has ended up there, we've got amino acids that's ended up in the small intestine after the food has all been broken down, and they will be absorbed or diffuse into the blood vessels that are there. So the blood vessels are providing an aid to carry the glucose and the amino acids about the body once they've been absorbed in there. Now the other thing that gets absorbed, or the other thing that you'll see in this picture here, is this thing here called a lacteal. Now when we talk about fats, when fats get broken down, they get broken down into these constituents here, fatty acids and glycerol. So they are the products of fat digestion, and it's the lacteal that absorbs those. Lacteals are made up of a larger transport system called the lymph system. You maybe have heard of that, or you maybe haven't, but that's an L there, it's not an H. But you don't need to know anything more about that, but just the fact that it is a transport system. And what is very common to be asked in an exam question is for you to be able to identify what gets absorbed where. In other words, for you to be able to know that it's glucose and amino acids get absorbed into the blood, and fatty acids and glycerol get absorbed into the lacteal. So I will post some videos on iTunes U as well.